Good morning or afternoon. My name is Janie Montblanc, and on behalf of the Great Basin Fire Science Exchange and our partners, I would like to welcome you to this webinar titled Herbicides for Downy Brome, Cheatgrass, Control. Herbicides for Downy Brome Control, What Works? Presented by Richard Lee with the BLM National Operations Center in Denver. Before I introduce our presenter, I will go over some webinar details. If you have questions or comments for the speaker or me, please type them into the questions window of your control panel located at the top right of your screen at any time during the webinar. I will field your questions for the speaker after the presentation. I also want to let you know that whatever you do in your control panel does not affect the webinar presentation, so you are welcome to type a test message or test your audio at any time during the webinar. If you're having problems with your audio, please open your audio window and check your audio selections. Now I'll introduce our presenter. Richard D. Lee is the Integrated Pest Management Specialist for the Bureau of Land Management National Operations Center in Denver, Colorado. In conjunction with the BLM's Integrated Pest Management Pesticide Applicator Certification Training Program, he has worked on the 2007 National Programmatic Vegetation Management Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, reviewed the Oregon EIS, and worked on the 2016 Programmatic Vegetation EIS, allowing the use of certain herbicides on BLM lands. Prior to coming to the BLM, Richard was the Extension Weed Specialist for the New Mexico State University Cooperative Extension Service for 18 years. He continues to organize and participate in a noxious weed short course and restoration and integrated pest management trainings. His educational background consists of the family dairy farm in northern Utah, a BS and MS from Utah State University, and a PhD in weed science from The Ohio State University. Welcome, Richard, and thank you for presenting today.
Thank you.
I will now make you the presenter.
Okay.
Great, looks great.
So we're ready to roll?
Yep.
Okay, let me remove, there we are. Slide that over there. Well, I want to thank you, Janae, for the opportunity to come and visit during the Great Basin Fire Exchange webinar series. Before I get started, let me point out one thing. That during my presentation, I will be using the common name downy brome. My brain just won't let me refer to Bromus tectorum as cheatgrass, and for this, I do apologize. Ever since I was a little boy, growing up on the family farm, I encountered a weed we called June grass. Why? Because it was in June that my shoes would look like this. I learned later on that I wasn't supposed to call it June grass, but that we're really talking about downy brome, or Bromus tectorum. Working with the BLM, a survey was conducted in 2014 in which the Bureau sought information on the gross estimated acreage of 26 species common throughout the West. It resulted in our identifying approximately 42 million acres infested with downy brome on lands the BLM administers. Now, for those who listened earlier last month to Tom Monaco, a USDA ARS out of Logan, Utah, his presentation dealing with downy brome control and impact on perennial grass abundance, a systematic review spanning 64 years, at the end of the article, the following statement is made. Because downy brome is a widespread invasive grass with long-term residency in some portions of western North America, it is doubtful that control efforts will result in its eradication. However, our review indicates that certain control efforts are capable of simultaneously decreasing downy brome while increasing perennial grass. During the final webinar in this series, Roger Sheely will speak regarding the ecologically based invasive plant management for reducing cheatgrass. One of the players in the overall process for the management or reducing of downy brome is the use of herbicides. Now, in identifying the herbicide active ingredients to include in the presentation addressing the management of downy brome in a rangeland setting, I sought input from Corey Ransom, Extension Weed Specialist, Utah State University, and Brian Mealer, Director of the Sheridan Research and Extension Center in Sheridan, Wyoming. Following our conversations, I came up with the following active ingredients that we'll talk about today. We'll take some time and talk about Imazapic. We'll take time to discuss glyphosate, Rimsulfuron, Aminopyralid, and finally, Indaziflam. Now, let's take a look at each of these. Imazapic. Imazapic is sold under the trade name of Plateau or Panoramic. It is a 2-pound acid equivalent per gallon formulation. It can be applied either pre or post-emergence. The label points out that post-emergence application is the method of choice in most situations, which would be supported by several researchers. Now, the range of application for a broadcast treatment is 2 to 12 fluid ounces per acre, which is 0.3 to 0.188 pounds acid equivalent per acre. Spot treatments involving Imazapic are made at 0.25 to 0.1% solution. If the post-emergence application is made, it requires the addition of an adjuvant, preferably a methylated seed oil, MSO, at the rate of 1.5 to 2 pints per acre. That is, if the sprayer output is 30 gallons per acre or less. If the gallons per acre is greater than 30, the methylated seed oil rate should be 1% volume. Now, methylated seed oil is the preferred adjuvant for efficacy, but it is known to cause injury to non-target species, suggesting that in certain situations, a non-ionic surfactant would be a better adjuvant. For spot treatments, the methylated seed oil would be the same 1% volume. Now, the maximum amount per acre per year is 12 fluid ounces, or 0.188 pounds acid equivalent. It is interesting to note that the label of the two products on the left, the Plateau and the Panoramic, both point out the benefits associated with incorporating the application of Imazapic in conjunction with the establishment and or release of desirable vegetation. Rimsulfuron. Rimsulfuron is sold under the trade name of Matrix SG. Matrix SG is registered in potatoes, tomatoes, fruit, nut, and vine crops. It was originally registered for control of invasive grasses as a supplemental label. Then later, that supplemental label was incorporated into the Matrix SG label. It is a 25% active ingredient formulation, with the rate of application being up to 4 ounces per acre or up to 1.0 ounce active ingredient. The application is either pre-emergent or post-emergent. with the pre-emergent requiring incorporation for activation, and the post-emergent application requiring the addition of a surfactant. In reviewing labels over the last couple of days in the CDMS or Green Book database, along with even viewing the DuPont website, it appears that there may have been a change within the company regarding Rimsulfuron and its use as a rangeland restoration tool, as I was unable to find reference in the Matrix SG label in those two databases. We know that with the merger of Dow and DuPont, there will be changes in the products available. So my guess is that we'll just have to keep a close watch to see how it all plays out in the future. But we still have the Alligary product of Laramie 25DF as an option for the Rimsulfuron. The label selection, though, in the Matrix SG identified the use as rangeland restoration west of the Mississippi River, pointing out also that there were issues associated with the spray mix of Matrix SG and the pH of the spray solution. If the pH is below 4 or above 8, the label indicates that degradation of the Matrix SG may occur. It also identifies an extensive restoration management program involving the use of the Rimsulfuron, with the statement pointing out that we are not to graze treated sites or cut for forage or hay for a minimum of 1 year after application, in order to allow newly emerged grasses sufficient time to become established. Where practical, it points out, fencing or other measures are to be used to prevent early grazing of reestablished sites and to help promote active grass restoration. Glyphosate. Glyphosate has multiple trade names. Just 3 are listed there on the left. The glyphosate is going to be a post-emergence application. The rate is going to be dictated by the formulation concentration. For example, Glystar Gold is identified as a 3-pound acid equivalent per gallon formulation of glyphosate. The label states that the rate of application is 12 to 16 fluid ounces per acre. Roundup Custom is a 4-pound acid equivalent glyphosate per gallon formulation. Its rate of application, according to the label, is 9 to 12 fluid ounces per acre. And finally, the Roundup Power Max is a 4.5 pounds acid equivalent glyphosate per gallon formulation. The label states that it is 8 to 11 fluid ounces per acre. Now, if you're used to applying 16 fluid ounces of glyphosate that you may be applying twice as much almost with regards to the recommended rate of glyphosate if you're not following the label. To make sure, if you look in converting the AI and the amount applied, those values for Glystar, Roundup Custom, and Roundup Power Max all equal a range of 0.28 pounds acid equivalent to 0.38 pounds acid equivalent per acre. So if you're changing your glyphosate formulations from year to year, make sure as you plan your use of glyphosate for downy brome control in rangeland situations that you're applying it according to what the label directs. With regards to the use of glyphosate on rangelands, it makes a couple of interesting statements on the label. Preventing viable seed production is key to the successful control and invasion of annual grassy weeds in rangelands. Follow-up applications in sequential years should eliminate most of the viable seeds. Grazing of treated areas should be delayed to encourage growth of desirable perennials. Allowing desirable perennials to flower and reseed in the treated area will encourage successful transition. It says on this particular label, apply 6 to 12 fluid ounces per acre to control or suppress many weeds, including downy brome, cheatgrass, cereal, rye, and jointed goat grass in rangelands. Apply when most brome plants are in the early flower and before the plants, including the seed heads, turn color. Allow for secondary weed flushes to occur in the spring following rain events, further depletes the seed reserve, and encourages perennial grass conversion on weedy sites. Fall applications are possible and recommended, where spring moisture is usually limited and fall germination allows for good weed control. The label will also provide information regarding the use of ammonium sulfate in the spray solution. Aminopyralid. Aminopyralid is sold under the trade name of Milestone and is a 2 pounds acid equivalent per gallon formulation. Aminopyralid was registered under the reduced risk process. It also has an extensive forage and manure management restriction stated on the label, as you can see here. These are some of the restrictions identified under the restrictions in hay and manure uses. Couple of interesting ones. Do not use treated plant residue, including hay or straw, from areas treated within the preceding 18 months in compost, mulch, or mushroom spawn. Extensive restrictions are identified. Now, for range and pastures, it says, do not use grasses treated with Milestone in the preceding 18 months for hay intended for export outside the United States. Hay from treated areas treated with Milestone in the preceding 18 months cannot be distributed or made available for sale off the farm or ranch where harvested unless allowed by supplemental labeling. Hay from areas treated with Milestone in the preceding 18 months cannot be used for silage, haylage, baleage, and green chop unless allowed by supplemental labeling. Do not move hay made from grass treated with Milestone within the preceding 18 months off farm unless allowed by supplemental labeling. Do not use hay or straw from areas treated with Milestone within the preceding 18 months or manure from animals feeding on hay treated with Milestone in compost. Do not use grasses treated with Milestone in the preceding 18 months for seed production. It also points out that applications may increase the palatability of certain poisonous plants. These would be post-emergent applications. Do not graze treated areas until poisonous plants are dry and no longer palatable. With regards to the use of Aminopyralid, the use rates are between 5 and 7 fluid ounces per acre. It is primarily a post-emergent herbicide requiring the addition of an adjuvant, and it does have good activity on knapweed species. The maximum amount per acre per year states do not apply more than 0.11 pound acid equivalent per acre per annual growing season as a result of broadcast, spot, or repeated applications. For spot treatments, they may be applied at an equivalent broadcast rate up to 14 fluid ounces of milestone per acre per annual growing season. However, not more than 50% of an acre may be treated at that rate. Early on, the label for the use of milestone for the control or suppression of Medusa head rye and other winter annual grasses was a supplemental label, stating that it was for distribution and use in states of Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Oregon, Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming. It pointed out that milestone applied broadcast at 4 to 17 fluid ounces can suppress or control many winter annual grasses, including Medusa head rye and downy brome. The key to optimum results is the timing of application. Application should be made in late summer prior to rains and seed germination in order to provide the best possibility of suppression or control. Grass control results may be poor if any of the winter annual grass seeds have germinated prior to the application. It may be tank mixed with a glyphosate formulation where non-selective herbicide can be used or desired. Pointing out that the application of Aminopyralid for the management of downy brome is going to be a pre-emergent application. Now, this changed recently in looking at a recent milestone label. The information has been incorporated into the main label and is no longer part of a supplemental registration. And as you see here, it says all of the same information that was presented on the supplemental label. Now, we'll turn our attention to Esplanade, which is sold under the trade name of, which has the common name of Indaziflam. It is sold as Esplanade 200 SC with a 1.67 pound AI per gallon formulation. Indaziflam is a pre-emergence herbicide. It does have an extensive list of annual and broadleaf and grassy weed species. Being a pre-emergent, it is going to require incorporation for activation. But it is interesting to note that the active ingredient, the Indaziflam, will persist on the soil surface and for up to 2 months until the needed incorporating moisture event takes place. Now, the use of Esplanade or Indaziflam as a supplemental label points out that Indaziflam, the timing of application is determined by precipitation, expectation, and weed targets. Applied during periods when sufficient precipitation to activate the herbicide is expected prior to target weed germination. But avoid application if heavy rain is expected, which can move the treated soil into areas with crops or desirable vegetation. Esplanade 200 SC has minimal post-emergent activity and generally does not control weeds that have emerged. A labeled post-emergent herbicide may be mixed with the Esplanade 200 SC. Then it has some wording regarding low rainfall areas of the West. It states, apply in the fall, winter, or spring, Esplanade 200 SC will not control winter annuals that have emerged at the time of application or that emerge prior to the activating rainfall. In areas of high rainfall of the east, areas in the fall to apply in the fall to control winter annual weeds, or apply in the spring to control spring and summer germinating weeds. Then it also makes the statement, this supplemental label identifies that Esplanade 200 SC may be used to release or reestablish desirable perennial grasses, forbs, shrubs, and trees in non-crop areas such as parks and open spaces, wildlife management areas, recreational areas, fire rehabilitation areas, prairies, and fire breaks. You will note that it is not registered for rangeland application, which by definition encompasses livestock grazing. It is, according to EPA, available for use on wildlife management areas and prairies. I guess that would be in the areas where the deer and the antelope play. On page 2 of that supplemental label, it points out again that you do not graze or feed forage, hay, or straw from treated areas to livestock. It is also needs to be pointed out that this supplemental label expires on 5/6/2018 and, quote, must not be used or distributed after this date. Now, in visiting with Bayer, I learned that Bayer is waiting for final approval on an extension of this supplemental label for an additional 2 years, allowing for the company to incorporate this information into the Section 3 or main label. So I guess we'll just have to keep watch as we get closer to this May 6th deadline for this particular supplemental label. Now, earlier, Wyoming was able to secure a Section 18 specific exemption for the use of Indaziflam for the control of medusa head and ventonata. According to the label, it is slated to expire on 9/14/2018. Other states are also considering the same action, securing a Section 18 registration. The label points out that within that Section 18 that you do not harvest treated forage or hay or allow livestock to graze in treated areas within 2 weeks of an Esplanade 200 SC treatment. So within the Section 18 label, there is a specific grazing restriction of 2 weeks. Now, what are the challenges we face with these 5 active ingredients? Let's consider just a couple. Imazapic. Do I apply it pre-germination to the downy brome? Or do I wait until early post 1 to 2 leaf stage? Or can I increase the rate to the upper limit, maybe 10 fluid ounces, and make a late post-emergence application, as has been identified by some researchers? Rimsulfuron. Even though it may provide more consistent management than Imazapic under certain conditions, it's important possibly to consider the cost per acre. In going through some online sites, I found some representative prices for typical application rates of 3 of the 4 active ingredients. All of these would be our pre-emergent registrations. Imazapic at 6 fluid ounces, based on the information I found, will cost you approximately $7.50 an acre. Rimsulfuron at 4 ounces per acre, which is the upper end of the Rimsulfuron, according to sources I found, equates to about $70 an acre. Aminopyralid or milestone at a pre-emergent rate of 7 fluid ounces per acre equals about $23 an acre. Indaziflam at the 5 fluid ounce typical application rate will run you about $45 an acre. The glyphosate probably is closer to $3 to $4 an acre as an average cost, but that would be as a post-emergent treatment. Those numbers are just strictly on the chemical itself. Cost is going to play a role in the decision-making process. Now, glyphosate. Glyphosate is a non-selective herbicide. The timing, the application, such that the downy brome will be managed with the desired species being minimally impacted. That's a challenge to make sure that we reduce the potential for impact on our desirable species. Aminopyralid. Applications need to be made late summer prior to the needed moisture event, incorporating the herbicide into the seed germination zone prior to the downy brome germinating. As with other pre-emergents, it is critical that we are able to time our application to make sure that we get the herbicide into the soil. Indaziflam. Challenges we face there is the extended residual control provides a challenge as to when a seeding operation can take place following the herbicide application. We can take advantage of the extended control by timing the herbicide application to the typical moisture event, even if that event comes in June or July. Consider if your main moisture comes as a monsoon during June and July, with the downy brome germinating late in the fall, early winter months. You can make your application of Indaziflam in May, taking advantage of the June or July monsoon rains, moving the Indaziflam into the soil. The extended properties of the Indaziflam will provide you control into the end of the application year and into the beginning of the following year. Now, obviously, that's going to be rate dependent, but typically we get extended control and we can take advantage of the Indaziflam for that purpose. Now, as we get ready to wind up my portion of this, let's take a look at a couple of things here. If you have a 1,000-acre site of rangeland infested with downy brome, it's late summer, early fall, and you have time finally to get to this project, what are you going to do? Now, if we were sitting in a classroom, I'd be walking up and inviting each of you to share your thoughts as we do this. But since I can't see you, we'll just see how it plays out. Number one option, you go to the chemical storage shed and you select the herbicide you know has activity on downy brome, and you get things ready for the application, whether by you or by contractor. That's one option. The second option, knowing what you know about the herbicides of choice, our 5 that we've talked about, What would be some of the questions you would need to have answered prior to opening the chemical shed and selecting the herbicide? The ones I've identified are not in any particular order, and were just those that came to my mind as I was putting this together. Questions to consider. 1. Has there been an assessment of the site, identifying the site's strengths and weaknesses? The goal here is we want to incorporate the site into the overall management effort. We need to know how we can utilize what we have in that particular site to optimize our downy brome management effort. That's one question. Another one would be the degree of downy brome infestation. You certainly want to know the degree to which the site is impacted. That's going to influence the ability or the availability of desirable species in that area. The characteristics of the location to be treated. Beyond just the vegetation characteristics, our herbicides and the management of downy brome is going to be impacted by the soil, the amount of moisture that is anticipated during the course of a year. The characteristics of the site become a critical aspect that needs to be addressed before you open the chemical shed. Now, if you have a pre-emergence application, can the application be made at a time when the moisture incorporation event will occur in time to provide a pre-germination management? Going in and pulling out the herbicide from the shed, you may be making an application. The characteristics of the site may dictate that the application in the fall may not be ideal for you to get the herbicide incorporated before the downy brome germinates. Timing is critical. And of course, we need to know the status of the perennial grass population. Additional questions. Is there a seeding restoration effort needed? If so, when is it planned? We certainly recognize that that's going to influence not only the active ingredient you select, but the amount of active ingredient or the rate of herbicide application is going to be influenced by the seeding and when it's planned. Is the seeding going to be broadcast or drilled? Typically, our drilling takes place in getting the seed between 1/4 and 1/2 inch under the soil surface. Much deeper than that, I'm told, it makes it difficult for the establishment of the desirable vegetation. If we are applying herbicides that are truly pre-emergent, it's going to influence whether or not that seeded vegetation is going to get established. If the treatment is planned as a post-emergent application, is it planned for early post-emergence in the fall or winter? Or is it planned for early spring? That will influence the amount of herbicide applied in the early spring, and that may have an impact on the desirable perennial population that makes up the site where you're making the application, giving you the decision that maybe for the sake of establishment and health of the perennial grasses, an early post-emergence in the fall or winter may be a more ideal application if we're thinking of using a non-selective herbicide like glyphosate. Now, if the application is made in the spring where we can have the selectivity, then we may find that that offers us the best option. Applications made in the spring involving Imazapic with a methylated seed oil may provide you with the needed control for the spring population of downy brome and also carry into the fall of the same year, giving you the extended control that you need for the downy brome. Are there species in the treated area that are going to be impacted by the post-emergent application at the time the application is made? And can that collateral damage be accepted? Or does the proposed rate of application need to be reconsidered, or even the planned active ingredient be reconsidered? If there are other management strategies planned for the site, how will they impact the herbicide application, such as targeted grazing? Are there restrictions on the label regarding the use of grazing livestock following the application? There are others. The point being that in the management of downy brome in a rangeland situation, there is more than just going to the chemical storage shed and selecting the nearest herbicide. By taking time to understand those herbicide active ingredients available for consideration in the management of downy brome, we can identify where they can play a role in the development and support of resistant and resilient landscapes. And I thank you for your time. And it looks like, Janae, I got pretty close to my 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. All right, if you have questions, please type them into your questions window, and I will field them to Dr. Lee. So the first question, how long until BLM approves Indaziflam for use on BLM lands?
You know, Janae, I figured that question would come. The BLM in 2016 completed the programmatic veg EIS for the addition of 3 new active ingredients. We are not to the point where we have decided what is the next step with regards to adding active ingredients to our list. I can't answer that at this time. We are very much interested in the work that's being done with Indaziflam as we try to better understand how to incorporate it into a vegetation restoration effort. Several researchers in the West are doing studies to identify the safety of the use of this true pre-emergent herbicide with an extended control and how that might play into the management of downy brome on large landscapes. But at this point, we are aware of it, but we are not working on the EIS at the present time.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, you were either very thorough, which you always are, or, oh, there's another question. All right, I was gonna say, just have to wait for people to type. Okay, have you had any experience with biological agents that attack cheat, or do you know of someone else that has worked with it?
As far as now, when we talk about biological, we can talk about biological control agents, and I'm aware that there is an effort that has been ongoing with regards to the use of a true classical biological control agent for downy brome. I do not know at the present time of the status of it, if it is making its way through the technical advisory group with regards of getting it approved for use on, for introduction into the United States. I can't answer that, but I am aware that there is an effort looking for a true biological control agent for downy brome.
Okay, thank you. When will the BLM have ability to use pelletized Imazapic to treat downy brome infested areas under shrubs?
You know, in looking at the label for open range, I was looking last night at labels, and I had a hard time finding a label for open range from Wilbur Ellis that identified its use as a herbicide registered for rangeland. Now, there is a product bulletin that talks about the use of Imazapic, the open range G, but it does point out that open range may not currently be used on pasture or rangeland without observing a rotation interval of 48 months. I was not able to find information in the open range G label where it pointed out that we have a 4-year restriction from the application to when the site can be grazed. So that's a question that I need to visit with Wilbur Ellis about in order to make sure that we put it down according to the label and in accordance with the Programmatic Veg EIS supporting the use of Imazapic.
Great, thank you. Are the timing restrictions for grazing typically meant to protect the grazer or the human consumer population? What about deer, for example, in a national park setting?
When the label for Indaziflam came out with that wording, I reached out to the EPA to ask them to help me understand why it was that it is okay that the label says that it can be applied for wildlife management and for prairies. And according to what I received from EPA, as part of the registration process for Indaziflam, Bayer has done an extensive product development identifying studies to analyze the potential impact on wildlife species. When you start talking about the use of livestock grazing, which is the trigger for EPA labeling, you start talking about the way in which the Indaziflam through that livestock, through that beef, can get into the general population through meat and milk. I recognize that there are those who utilize deer and elk, but probably not to the same extent as is utilized by beef. And according to EPA, the range and pasture is not a land use determination, rather it is an application determination, and it is tied to livestock grazing.
Great, thank you so much. Could the use of ESR electrostatic spray rig be used to increase efficiency and decrease the cost of the herbicides that have a foliar action?
Well, based on a presentation I listened to 2 weeks ago, the answer is yes. There are labels, if you look, there are supplemental labels identified for the use of electrostatic spray application for certain herbicides that are used to control brush and woody species, primarily in the South eastern part of the United States, over in the southeastern part of New Mexico, where they have been using electrostatic sprayers to control juniper. So yes, but it would be tied into supplemental labeling, because I'm not sure it would work for all post-emergent herbicides.
Okay, great, thank you. That is our last question for now. If you're still typing, that's fine. I have a little closing spiel and can get back to you. But if that is the last question, indeed, then thank you all for your participation. And please join us for the next webinar, Grazing to Maintain Perennial Bunch Grasses and Reduce Non-Native Annuals, with Kirk Davies on April 11th. Okay, it looks like we have one more question. How would you rate the effectiveness of the herbicides that you mentioned?
With regards to downy brome control, the information that I've received, and as I visit with researchers, and probably some of you out there, you're telling me that Indaziflam offers outstanding control of downy brome. We know that under certain situations, Rimsulfuron does a very good job. The cost per acre may make it difficult for us at times. Imazapic probably has struggled to gain a reputation of being a consistent player in the management of downy brome. In reading some articles, that may be tied into the possibility that we focus too much of our effort on making it a pre-emergent herbicide rather than taking advantage of its post-emergence activity. Glyphosate is used obviously for the control of the downy brome, but you have the potential for collateral damage because it is a non-selective. So I guess the short answer to your question would be, I think probably based on what we know right at this moment, the Indaziflam offers pretty consistent control of downy brome, with Imazapic being second, and then the Rimsulfuron and Glyphosate third and fourth.
Thank you so much. All right, we would greatly appreciate it if you would take our 3-question survey that will appear after the webinar has ended. I will post the recording of this webinar on our Great Basin Fire Science YouTube channel this afternoon, and the link will be automatically sent to you through this GoToWebinar system tomorrow. If you have further questions regarding this or other webinars, please email or call me anytime. And Richard Lee posted his contact information as well. Yeah, so again, thank you all for attending, and thank you so much, Richard, for your presentation.
Thank you, Jenny. It was my pleasure.
All right, have a great day.